John Peters Ringo known as Johnny Ringo was a known associate of the loosely federated group of outlaw Cochise County Cowboys in frontier Tombstone, Cochise County, Arizona Territory. He was affiliated with Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Bean, Ike Clanton, and Frank Stillwell during 1881–1882. Early life: Ringo was born in Greens Fork, of distant Dutch ancestry. His family moved to Liberty, Missouri in 1856. He was a contemporary of Frank and Jesse James, who lived nearby in Kearney, Missouri, and became a cousin of the younger brothers through marriage when his aunt Augusta Peters Inskip married Coleman P. Younger, uncle of the Outlaws. In 1858, the family moved to Gallatin, Missouri, where they rented property from the father of John W. Sheets. On July 30, 1864, his family was in Wyoming en route to California. Johnny's father Martin Ringo stepped out of their wagon holding a shotgun which accidentally discharged, killing him. The buckshot entered the right side of Martin's face and exited the top of his head. 14-year-old Johnny and his family buried Martin on a hillside alongside the trail. Mason County War. By the mid-1870s, Ringo had migrated from San Jose, California to Mason County, Texas. Here he befriended an ex-Texas Ranger named Scott Cooley, who was the adopted son of a local rancher named Tim Williamson. Trouble started when two American rustlers, Elijah and Pete Backus, were dragged from the Mason jail and lynched by a predominantly German mob. Full-blown war began on May 13, 1875, when Tim Williamson was arrested by a hostile posse and murdered by a German farmer named Peter Bader. Cooley and his friends, including Johnny Ringo, conducted a terror campaign against their rivals. Officially called the Mason County War, locally it was called the Hoodoo War. Cooley retaliated by killing the local German ex-deputy sheriff, John Wiley, shooting him, scalping him, and tossing his body down a well on August 10, 1875. Cooley already had a reputation as a dangerous man, and was respected as a Texas Ranger. He killed several others during the war. After Cooley supporter Moses Baird was killed, Ringo committed his first murder on September 25, 1875 when he and a friend named Bill Williams rode up in front of the house of James Chaney, the man who led Baird into the ambush. Chaney came out unarmed, invited them in, and began washing his face on the porch, when both Ringo and Williams shot and killed him. The two then rode to the house of Dave Dool and called him outside, but he came out with a gun, so they fled back into town. Sometime later, Scott Cooley and Johnny Ringo mistook Charlie Bader for his brother Pete and killed him. After that, both men were jailed in Burnett, Texas by Sheriff A.J. Strickland. Both Ringo and Cooley were broken out of jail by their friends shortly thereafter, and parted company to evade the law. By November 1876, the Mason County War had petered out after costing a dozen or so lives. Scott Cooley was believed dead, and Johnny Ringo and his pal George Gladden were locked up once again. One of Ringo's alleged cellmates was the notorious killer John Wesley Hardin. While Gladden was sentenced to 99 years, Ringo appears to have been acquitted. 2 years later, Ringo was noted as being a constable in Loyal Valley, Texas. Soon after this, he appeared in Arizona for the first time. Life in Tombstone. Ringo first appeared in Cochise County, Arizona Territory in 1879 with Joseph Graves Olney, a friend from the Mason County War. In December 1879, a drunk Ringo shot unarmed Louis Hancock in a Safford, Arizona saloon when Hancock refused a complimentary drink of whiskey, stating that he preferred beer. Hancock survived his wound. In Tombstone, Arizona, Ringo had a reputation as having a bad temper. He may have participated in robberies and killings with the Cowboys. He was occasionally erroneously referred to as Ringold by local newspapers. Confrontation with Doc Holliday. On January 17, 1882, Ringo and Doc Holliday traded threats and seemed to be headed into a gunfight. Both men were arrested by Tombstone's new chief of police, James Flynn, and hauled before a judge for carrying weapons in town. Both were fined. Judge William H. Stilwell followed up on charges outstanding against Ringo for a robbery in Galeyville, and Ringo was rearrested and jailed on January 20 for the weekend. Ringo was suspected by the Earps of taking part in the murder of Morgan Earp on March 18, 1882. Joins posse pursuing Earps. Deputy U.S. Marshal Wyatt Earp and his posse killed Frank Stilwell in Tucson on March 20, 1882. After the shooting, the Earps and a federal posse set out on a vendetta to find and kill the others they held responsible for maiming Virgil and killing Morgan. Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Bean received warrants from a Tucson judge for arrest of the Earps and Holliday. He deputized Ringo and 19 other men, many of them cowboys and friends of Frank Stilwell. Ringo joined the county posse that pursued but never found the federal posse. During the Earp vendetta ride, Wyatt Earp killed one of Ringo's closest friends, Curly Bill Brocius, in a gunfight at Iron Springs about 20 miles from Tombstone. Earp told his biographer Lake that he got Cruz to confess to being the lookout at Morgan's murder, and that Cruz identified Johnny Ringo, Frank Stilwell, Hank Swilling, and Curly Bill as Morgan's killers, though modern researchers doubt Wyatt's account. Ringo's death. On July 14, 1882, Ringo's body was found by a neighboring property owner laying against or in the low-lying fork of the trunk of a large tree in West Turkey Creek Valley, near Chiricahua Peak. The neighbor had heard a single shot around 2 o'clock on the afternoon before Ringo was found. Ringo's feet were wrapped in pieces of his undershirt, possibly to protect his feet against insects or scorpions. His revolver had one round expended and was found hanging by one finger in his hand. His horse was found 2 weeks later with Ringo's boots tied to the saddle, a method commonly used in that time period to keep scorpions out of boots. The horse had gotten loose from his picket and wandered off. Suicide. The coroner found that Ringo had a bullet hole in his right temple and an exit wound at the back of his head. After an inquest, the coroner ruled that his death had been caused by a single shot through the head and concluded Ringo had committed suicide. Ringo was buried close to where his body was found alongside the tree in which he was found. The tree fell around 2010 and its remains are near his grave. The grave is located on private land and is accessible through a gate with instructions on how to get to the grave site. Although the coroner ruled that Ringo killed himself, Wyatt Earp once claimed responsibility, and modern researchers have advanced several theories about who might have killed him, including Doc Holliday, Michael Earp, and Buckskin Frank Leslie. Wyatt Earp theory. The book I Married Wyatt Earp, supposedly written by Josephine Marcus Earp, reported that Wyatt Earp and Holliday returned to Arizona to find and kill Ringo. The book, edited by Glenn Boyer, claims that Holliday killed Ringo with a rifle shot at a distance, contradicting the coroner's ruling that Ringo's death was a suicide. However, Boyer's book has been discredited as a fraud and a hoax that cannot be relied on. In response to criticism about the book's authenticity, Boyer said that the book was not really a first-person account, that he had interpreted Wyatt Earp in Josephine's voice, and admitted that he couldn't produce any documents to validate his statements. Doc Holliday theory. Holliday was fighting a court case in Colorado at the time of Ringo's death. Official records of the District Court of Pueblo County, Colorado indicate that both Doc and his attorney appeared in court there on July 11, 14 and 18, 1882, which, if true, would make it impossible for Holliday to have killed Ringo. Author Karen Holliday Tanner, in Doc Holliday, A Family Portrait, speculated that Doc may not have been in Pueblo at the time of the court date, citing a writ of habeas corpus issued for him in court on July 11. She believes that only his attorney may have appeared on his behalf that day, in spite of the wording of a court record which indicated that he may have appeared in persona in propria persona or in his own person. She cites this as standard legal filotext which does not necessarily prove that the person was present. There is no doubt that Holliday arrived in Salida, Colorado on July 7 as reported in a town newspaper. This is 500 miles from the site of Ringo's death, 6 days before the shooting. Michael Earp theory. Fred Dodge, a Wells Fargo and Company undercover agent, attributed Ringo's killing to Michael Earp, a gambler. Irk had been arrested for murdering Henry Schneider in January, 1881. Curly Bill Brocius and John Ringo encouraged talk of a lynching and led other men who pursued the wagon carrying Irk. McKelvey got to the outskirts of Tombstone and the Last Chance Saloon just ahead of the mob, where he was met by Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Ib, and was escorted to jail in Tucson. Irk escaped from jail on April 18, 1881. On May 13, the Epitaph reported that Johnny Behind the Deuce had been seen 3 days ago in the Dragoon Mountains. He was well mounted and equipped, and was on the eve of departure for Texas. The climate of Arizona, he said, did not agree with him. He was indicted by the grand jury on May 19, 1881, but never stood trial for the miner's murder. Irk held on to a burning rage toward Ringo and Curly Bill. According to a conversation that Dodge had with Frank Leslie, Irk learned in July, 1882 that Ringo and Buckskin Frank Leslie were camping in the Turkey Creek Canyon area. Irk knew that Ringo had been drinking heavily for the last week and made camp in the same area. On July 14, Irk allegedly found Ringo sleeping off his liquor and killed him, arranging the body to look like a suicide. The story had enough credibility that many believed it to be true, including Ringo's close friend Pony Dale. Frank Leslie theory Other theories postulate that Buckskin Frank Leslie killed Ringo. Leslie found Ringo drunk and asleep in a tree. Hoping to curry favor with the Ep supporters in office, he shot Ringo through the head. Billy Claiborne believed that Leslie killed Ringo, and it was said that his fatal shootout with Leslie was due to this fact. However, in reality, Claiborne was demanding that Leslie refer to him as Billy the Kid, and, when Leslie refused, Claiborne challenged him. Claiborne was shot through the right side, the bullet exiting out his back, and died hours later. His last words were supposedly, "Frank Leslie killed John Ringo. I saw him do it." In popular culture, Louis Lama wrote that he had found nothing in Old West history to commend John Ringo as a particularly noteworthy bartman. According to Lama, Ringo was a surly, bad-tempered man who was worse when he was drinking, and that his main claim to fame was shooting the unnamed Louis Hancock in an Arizona Territory saloon in 1879 for ordering beer after Ringo told him to order whiskey. Lama wrote that he did not understand how Ringo earned such a strong reputation as a bad man in legend. Other authors have concluded that perhaps Ringo's memorable name, coupled with his confrontations with the canonically good Earp brothers, contributed to his latter-day reputation. Film and television In the 1950 film The Gunfighter, the title character, played by Gregory Peck, is named Jimmy Ringo. In the film, Ringo is sympathetically depicted as a man constantly trying to put his notorious past behind him. In a 1954 episode of the syndicated Western series Stories of the Century, Ringo was played by Donald Curtis as John B. Ringgold. Emlyn Davis played his spinster sister, Helen, who tries in vain to convince him to turn away from lawlessness. Stories of the Century was the first Western to win an Emmy Award. In a 1957 episode The Equalizer of the Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, Ringo is portrayed by John Pickard, with Elisha Cook, Jr., as Guns McCullum, a gunsmith hired by Mayor James H. Dog Kelly of Dodge City, Kansas. Ringo is portrayed by John Ireland in the 1957 film Gunfight at the OK Corral. In this version, the animosity between Ringo and Doc Holliday is caused when Big Nose Kate leaves Doc to become Ringo's lover. This is non-historical, although in Kate's letters she does note that Ringo visited her when Holliday was in jail briefly in November 1881 in connection with the OK Corral Spicer hearing, and it is quite possible that Holliday grew jealous. The movie portrays Ringo as a participant in the titular gunfight, when in fact he was not present. The film depicts Holliday lecturing a wounded Ringo about the triumph of good over evil before he shoots Ringo dead. Johnny Ringo's Last Ride is an episode of the ABC Western series Tombstone Territory, which aired on February 19, 1958, with Myron Healy in the role of Ringo. The series starred Pat Conway and Richard Eastham. A 1959–1960 CBS television series used Ringo's name, but had little to do with his actual life. Johnny Ringo aired for one season. Ringo was played by Don Durant and carried a LeMat revolver. While CBS was airing the series Johnny Ringo, Peter M. Thompson played the role of Ringo in the episode The Clantons Family Row on December 8, 1959 on the ABC Diesel series, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, starring Hugh O'Brien as Wyatt Earp. In the storyline, Ringo faces a potential gunfight with Curly Bill Brocius, portrayed by William Phipps, because of an argument over a horse. Earp works to stop the gunfight, and Doc Holliday, played by Douglas Fowley, takes bets on the outcome. Ringo is the inspiration for the historically inaccurate but highly popular song Ringo sung by Bonanza TV Cowboy Lorne Greene, which topped the pop charts at number 1 in late 1964. Ringo is portrayed by Luke Askew in the High Chaparral episode Shadow of the Wind. In the 1986 television remake of Stagecoach, the Ringo Kid is played by Chris Christopherson. The character of the gambler Hatfield is changed to Doc Holliday. In the remake, Holliday is played in name by Willie Nelson, and Holliday and the Ringo Kid are allies, which is ironic given their relationship in real life. In 1993's Tombstone, Ringo is played by Michael Biehn. In this version, he is second in command of the Cowboys. He is characterized as a violent sociopath who aspires to humiliate and destroy Doc Holliday. He is also characterized as highly educated, at one point trading Latin taunts with Holliday. In the film, Holliday kills him. In the 1994 film Wyatt Earp, Ringo is played by Norman Howell. In this film, Curly Bill Brocius is the major antagonist. Ringo is an antagonist in the Doctor Who story The Gunfighters, in which he is played by Lawrence Payne. He is inaccurately portrayed as not only being present at the gunfight at the OK Corral but as one of its casualties. In the novelization, he is depicted as a classicist and intends to spend his wages on an encyclopedia of classical biography. In the episode Dead Man's Hill of the television series The Lost World, Johnny Ringo is played by David Orth as an outlaw in cahoots with the ruthless Sheriff Jack Challenger, who have framed an innocent man for the murder of another woman's husband. Johnny Ringo was depicted on the television series, The High Chaparral, twice in 1969. In one episode, Ringo was portrayed by veteran television and film character actor, Robert V. Haro. In another episode, Ringo was portrayed by veteran actor, Luke Askew. The premise of both episodes was that Ringo was a misunderstood outlaw and longtime friend of Manuelito Montoya. In literature Johnny Ringo is the protagonist of a novel entitled Confessions of Johnny Ringo by Jeff Aguilar. In the novel, Ringo's real name is Ringgold, and he is depicted as a young man studying medicine who is driven to become an outlaw during the Civil War when his sweetheart is killed by Union troops in Missouri. He is killed by Wyatt Earp, who frees his spirit to reunite with a sweetheart. Johnny Ringo is depicted in the Mr. Blueberry arc of the French graphic novel Blueberry as a psychotic and delusional gunslinger and scalp hunter who sacrifices women to a mystical entity known as Red Dragon. In the 2010 steampunk novel The Buntline Special by Mike Risnick, Ringo is already dead, but becomes reanimated by magic and sent to Tombstone, Arizona as an assassin. His new zombie appearance frequently scares the townsfolk. Other media in 2011 metalcore band, Crown the Empire, formed in Dallas, Texas, wrote a song called Johnny Ringo, which can be found on their EP, Limitless. In 2012, the band wrote a sequel to the song, titling it Johnny's Revenge, which can be found on their first full-length album called The Fallout. Another song, called Johnny's Rebellion, was released on their album that was released on July 22, 2014 called The Resistance, Rise of the Runaways. In the 2013 video game Call of Juarez, Gunslinger, Johnny Ringo is depicted as one of the three men responsible for murdering the brothers of the fictitious bounty killer Silas Greaves. As Silas recounts his years tracking down his brother's killers, he claims that his hunt for Ringo led to the death of Newman Haynes Clanton in the Guadalupe Canyon Massacre, and a survivor of the massacre mistaking Greaves for Wyatt Earp inadvertently triggered the gunfight at the OK Corral. Ringo himself makes an appearance as a boss in the subsequent level, with Silas claiming responsibility for Ringo's death in Turkey Creek Canyon. The Japanese anime titled Humanity Has Declined features a character named Assistant who in the episode titled Fairies Time Management Part 2 insists that the main character refer to him as Johnny Ringo, which is a play on words, as the Japanese word for apple is Ringo. References. Further reading, Burroughs, Jack. John Ringo, The Gunfighter Who Never Was. Tucson, Arizona, University of Arizona Press. ISBN 0-8165-0975-1. Gatto, Steve. Johnny Ringo. Lansing, Proter House. ISBN 0-9720910-1-7. External links, works by or about Johnny Ringo at Internet Archive, Johnny Ringo at the Internet Movie Database, johnnyringo.com. The most complete biographical info available on the web. John Ringo Family History. Tombstone History. This site has a photo of Ringo, gives a valuable timeline for Ringo's life, and directions for finding Ringo's grave. Johnny Ringo Grave Site. Arizona Ghost Towns. This is a second link to the gravesite. Mason County War. The Handbook of Texas Online.